When it comes to tech these days, it's got to be sleek, stylish, and above all else, thin. Take my shiny new Samsung Galaxy S8 Plus for example. It's so sleek and thin, it goes beyond the realms of being remotely practical. Drop it once from any height greater than its own length, and you're probably gonna have a bad day. Thankfully, MSI's unbelievably slim and thankfully still very stylish GS63VR 7RF Stealth Pro is much easier to live with, as long as you're creative enough to come up with a more appropriate name. If you are unimpressed with the beefcake that is Gigabyte's Aero 15, I mean that thing measures 19.9mm thick. What, do they think the average game is built like The Rock? Well, thankfully MSI has come to the rescue with their GS60, let's just call it the Stealth Pro. Anyway, the Stealth Pro measures just 17.7mm thick, and that's 11% thinner than Gigabyte's ultra-portable gaming laptop that Tim was mighty impressed with. So what's MSI managed to cram into this 1.8kg pancake of a laptop, and perhaps more importantly, just how have they done it? Well, let's go find out. Inside, they've managed to include a GeForce GTX 1060 with all 6GB of VRAM, 2 memory DIMMs populated with DDR4 2400 memory, a 7th generation Intel Core i7 processor, an M.2 SSD, and room for a 2.5-inch drive as well. The only real sacrifice, as far as I can tell, has been made to the battery, which is a 3-cell 57 watt-hour job. So I don't expect it will last too long when unplugged from the external 180 watt power brick. It's also well worth noting this is the lightest 15-inch laptop on the market to feature the GeForce GTX 1060, so that's quite an impressive achievement by MSI. Skirting the exterior, you will find a plethora of connectivity. On the left, there's an Ethernet port, which MSI has managed to cram in, along with an SD card slot, 3 USB 3.0 ports, and 2 3.5mm audio jacks. On the right is a single USB 2.0 port, Thunderbolt 3 via USB Type-C, HDMI 2.0, mini display port, and a proprietary power connector. The amount of USB ports on this laptop is fantastic, although the position of the power connector and display outputs may inhibit mouse usage in some circumstances. I should also note that the ports on the left and right edges are also quite close to the front. This is in order to accommodate the massive internal cooling solution, which I'll cover in a moment. Something worth noting is the fact that the Stealth Pro can support up to 3 external displays, each at a resolution up to 4K. In fact, it's possible to run up to 4 displays simultaneously, as you can still use the laptop's own display with 3 monitors connected. MSI calls this their Matrix display, and they say it makes for mega multitasking support even during competitive gameplay. This makes the Stealth Pro extremely powerful when it comes to display options. Moving on, around the Stealth Pro we find a mostly black design that's complemented by a small handful of red highlights, including a red rim around the trackpad, several red lines near the exhaust vents, the MSI Gaming logo on the lid, and the well-hidden power status LED above the keyboard. The subtle highlight approach works well, and it fits in with MSI's stealth branding. What I really appreciate about this laptop is that the most interesting elements are more functional than aesthetic. For example, the display hinge folds back more than 180 degrees. Which is more than most traditional laptops. I'm not sure why you need or want to use the Stealth Pro with the display parallel to your desk, but nonetheless, it's an option. The overall style of this laptop is similar to MSI's other offerings, with generous use of brushed magnesium alloy around the keyboard area and the top side of the lid. The smooth black finish is a definite fingerprint magnet though, although visually the design is excellent, and it certainly appears very sleek and stylish, as I mentioned earlier. There's essentially no gamer elements to be found, making this the perfect work/play laptop. I should note that in order to unlock the full power of the GTX 1060, you'll need to carry around the rather large power brick. The brick is almost twice as thick as the laptop itself and weighs a hefty 580 grams, which needs to be factored into the portability calculations. Of course, the laptop does work without this power brick, although the 65 watt-hour internal battery won't let you get away from the mains power for too long. And as is always the case with laptops, graphics performance is significantly reduced when on battery power. Underneath the Stealth Pro we find yet another interesting inclusion, felt. The bottom of the laptop is covered in this soft material, except for where the intake vents are. Naturally, you don't want to block those with any kind of material. The felt also provides some insulation, and it does prevent the GPU from simply channeling all of its heat through the metal body onto your legs. I really do like this addition, and for me it provides a very premium look and feel. Opening up the laptop lid, we find an impressive looking 15.6-inch IPS display supporting a resolution of 1920 by 1080, and this provides a pixel density of 141 pixels per inch. This resolution is typical for a gaming laptop of this size, and well suited to the performance of the GTX 1060. There is also a 4K IPS option available, though you can of course expect to pay quite a bit more extra for that one. Lastly though, it was a little disappointing to discover that this premium laptop lacked G-Sync or a refresh rate higher than 60Hz. Complementing the sharp looking display is a SteelSeries keyboard using chiclet keys, which are fine for gaming, and the tactile feel of each key is surprisingly clicky considering the use of rubber dome keycaps. The keyboard layout is very good with adequate size for important gaming keys like Tab, Left Shift, Control and Spacebar. There are full-sized arrow keys awkwardly crammed between the standard keyboard and the numpad, though I do appreciate the inclusion of a numpad on a laptop that clearly has enough room to include one. System functions such as volume adjustment, brightness adjustment, aeroplane mode and so forth are mapped to both the F keys and arrow keys, and there's a good mix of inclusions here. The keyboard is backlit via 3 zones of RGB LEDs. In MSI's utility, you can change the colour of each of the 3 zones, and there are additional functions to pulse the backlight in various patterns. The rainbow effect looks pretty cool, though it should be noted that each individual key is not RGB programmable. If you'd prefer a solid backlit colour, red looks best as it matches the physical red highlights of the laptop. So we know that the Stealth Pro is super thin, and we know that it has some seriously impressive hardware inside. So how does it go about keeping everything cool and hopefully clear of any throttling issues? Well, let's crack it open and take a look. Getting inside is relatively easy. There are just a little over a dozen small screws that need to be removed from the bottom cover, and then the back just pops out of place. Inside we find an easy to replace 2.5-inch drive and a slimline battery, but beyond that there isn't much else to see. The internals are mostly facing upwards, which means replacing the SSD and DDR4 memory is extremely difficult, which is a bit frustrating to be honest. The only part of the cooling that's visible here are the 3 red blower fans, which look cool but don't give too much away. In order to get to the cooling as well as the SSD and memory, you need to completely remove the motherboard, which is a bit extreme and not something your average laptop owner is going to want to do, not to mention you are voiding your warranty by removing the cover to begin with. Once pulled apart, I found what MSI call their Trinity cooler. This design employs 3 fans, 2 of which are larger fans featuring 41 blades, while there is a smaller 37 blade fan. The GPU is cooled by a 41 and 37 blade fan, while the other 41 blade fan takes care of the CPU. MSI claims that these fans feature their unique whirlwind blade design, which increases air pressure by up to 30%. Basically, this boils down to more generic blower type fans featuring fewer fins, but with thicker blades, whereas MSI has gone with more of a turbine-like design, if you will, featuring more blades that are a lot thinner, just 0.4mm wide in fact. Linking everything together are 5 ultra-slim heat pipes, and they connect up to 4 individual banks of aluminium fins. It's without question one of the most impressive and complex cooling solutions I've found lurking inside a gaming laptop. MSI says their design reduces load temperatures to 71 degrees, whereas other gaming laptops run at 84 degrees or higher, so I'm keen to check out their claims. I should note that I only tore down the laptop after having first tested it, so this won't impact the results. Speaking of results, let's move on to see how well the Stealth Pro games and how much noise it makes when under load. First up, let's quickly see how the Stealth Pro handled itself in Battlefield 1. In this scene we can see the frame rate hovered between 70 to 80 FPS. I played this map for about 5 minutes, and in that time I saw an average of 83 FPS with a minimum of 64 FPS, so very respectable performance using the ultra quality preset at 1080p. Moving to F1 2016, we saw an average of 61 FPS with a minimum of 44 FPS. Again, the game was maxed out at the 1080p resolution. In this title, the max GPU temp hovered around 80 degrees, while the GTX 1060 ran at a fairly consistent 74 degrees throughout the test. World of Tanks played very smoothly using max quality settings. In our test we averaged 102 FPS and never saw frame rates dip below 70 FPS. The CPU temperature was again around 80 degrees, and this time the GPU hit 76 degrees.
Hang back, that tangle might spot you.
Ghost Recon Wildlands was played using the medium quality preset, as this game is somewhat lacking when it comes to optimization. Anyway, using these settings at 1080p, we saw an average of 63 FPS, though at times frame rates did dip as low as 47 FPS.
You rattled somebody's cage.
Counter-Strike Global Offensive was tested using the very high quality settings with FXAA enabled. This allowed the Stealth Pro to average 158 FPS with a minimum of 132 FPS. The GPU only hit 72 degrees in this title, while the CPU pushed up around 86 degrees. For testing Titanfall 2, I went with the single player campaign because visually this seems more demanding than the multiplayer portion of the game. Anyway, we saw an average of 73 FPS with a minimum of 56 FPS. You can tell this title is light on CPU usage as temps stayed below 80 degrees for the Core i7-7700 HQ. Overwatch was silky smooth with 134 FPS on average, and frame rates never dipped below 100 FPS. That said, this was a bit of a hot item for the Stealth Pro as it hit 90 degrees on the CPU and 78 degrees for the GPU. Finally, we have Prey, and here the Stealth Pro did very nicely, offering an average of 85 FPS with a minimum of 64 FPS, so the game was very nice and smooth. The CPU peaked at 82 degrees, while the GPU sat at about 75 degrees for the most part. Overall, the Stealth Pro performed very well, frame rate performance was excellent, and the operating temperature was exceptional for a gaming laptop. Here's a quick look at how it sounds under full load. That might sound loud, but the fact is, with the laptop speakers set to even a low volume, they completely drown out any fan noise, so it's really a non-issue, especially if you plan to use headphones. Operating temperatures were also very good when gaming. The GPU never throttled, and throughout our testing stayed below 80 degrees. That said though, the CPU did often exceed 80 degrees and was at times seen hitting as high as 90 degrees, but even so, that's still very good for a gaming laptop. When it comes to battery life, gaming isn't really a consideration. However, if you want to watch movies, for example, I found the battery would last for around 4 hours, which isn't too bad and again quite good for a gaming laptop. In my opinion, the Stealth Pro is a seriously impressive gaming laptop for a whole host of reasons. Firstly, I really love the slim and lightweight design. That's great, and when you couple that with the impressive gaming performance, well, you have a real winner on your hands. For me, the size and weight advantage of the Stealth Pro has a big impact on daily usage. While other 15-inch laptops are largely desk-bound, this laptop can be comfortably taken around and used in multiple locations. And the great thing here is that you gain the portability without sacrificing performance. At this size, weight and price, the Stealth Pro competes strongly with the latest Razer Blade, managing to narrowly beat it in all three categories. Perhaps more impressive is the fact that it manages to pack a larger display into a body that's marginally lighter than the Blade. Although the footprint of the Blade is smaller thanks to the 14-inch display. Right now, it's possible to pick up the Stealth Pro for $100 US less than the Razer Blade 2017 model, which Tim just reviewed. Also, Aussie shoppers can now buy the Stealth Pro from the likes of JB Hi-Fi, and I'll provide a link in the video description. Of course, as you guys have no doubt noticed, the Stealth Pro and competing laptops certainly aren't cheap. You're definitely paying a premium for a compact gaming laptop. But still, for those who want a game on the go, the premium to me seems well worth it. Anyway, that's going to do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the review. I'm your host, Steve, and I'll see you again soon.